Your work has influenced not just filmmakers, but technologists and game developers, and probably how an entire generation thinks about reality.
We're about to enter an era where that IP creator really can be thinking across formats. The modern creator could start thinking about now making stories and experiences, stories and games and other media types, because the technical and cost barriers to that have been coming down, 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 as we all know.
Okay, you ready?
Let's go.
John, welcome to Brothers Saga. We are genuinely honored to have you here. Your work has influenced not just filmmakers, but technologists and game developers, and probably how an entire generation thinks about reality between the Matrix, between immersive storytelling, now AI. You've been at the center of multiple creative inflection points. So yeah, we're excited to go deep today, not just on what you've built, but how you think.
For those of you who don't know, John Gaeta is a visual effects designer, a director, a producer, SVP of creative strategy, chief creative officer, an inventor, and founder. He's best known for inventing the bullet time effect in the Matrix, and nearly 2 years ago founded Escape AI Media, which curates and distributes radical new forms of entertainment. He's coined neocinema and neoplay gaming in the pursuit of storytelling, experience, and art. John, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you. It's fabulous to be with you guys today.
Great. So let's dive right in. Start with Escape AI. So you refer to it as an intelligent entertainment platform. And just looking into sort of your history, the old days on the Matrix, the studio up at the naval base was called ESC, like Escape Studios, and I think you've described yourself as an escape artist. So what's behind the name Escape?
Yes, that's very astute of you to have found the history point there. We don't talk a lot about that, but it's true. There was a time, literally in the middle of the Matrix trilogy being made, where we, when I say we, I mean the Wachowskis,
Mhm.
other close colleagues who were, at the heads of visual effects. We made a move in terms of establishing a new company in order to handle the scale of what the sequels were going to be, because it's supersized. It's supersized at that moment, and we needed to, essentially form an entity that was literally focused on the Matrix. So the name of that entity just happens to have been Escape, and you can you can actually go a little deeper on that, insofar as there is a moment in the first Matrix where you see Neo hitting the escape button
Mm.
when he's in the apartment, and he's trying to disconnect himself from what appears to be a dream or
Mm.
something going wrong with the computer. Yeah, and that is where the origin of that word for that entity was. And that entity was on the Alameda Naval Base, and for years was pioneering things, and eventually evolved, eventually stopped. Warner Brothers decided, okay, it was no longer something they needed, so it kind of vanished. But which is a shame, because it was truly the leading edge of all of visual effects, while literally when it vanished. Um,
Wow.
so years later, I still love the word, of course, because it's rooted in a concept, right? Escapism, which is just a fantastic word that'll always be applicable, right, to the new sort of ways that people, sort of detach themselves from reality.
Yeah, for sure. I still remember walking out of the Matrix and trying to pull the thing out of my head.
Searching, Just making sure
Yeah.
there's no metal underneath the skin there.
And as that philosophy translates into the company, you've been building a thesis around the modern creator. When you're hiring or collaborating with AI creators, what are you actually looking for? Is it technical skill, artistic intuition, taste, curiosity? Like, what kind of questions do you ask to figure out if you've got the right escape artist?
Yeah, another good question. So there's two pieces to that, right? There's what the modern creator might mean, and and then the other is, who's coming on to escape and why. I'll take the latter first. So, in emergent storytelling, paradigm, new paradigm, the early days, are not necessarily days in which you've reached the end, right? You're not sure exactly, uh, how people are going to use any kinds of tools to get to their desired outcome, which may be, oh, I'm going to begin a story world, I'm going to tell a story, or build authors an experience. And so through, since cinema even uh, began, these tools have constantly changed, and people have done everything they could to um, apply them to get to their end goal. And so there needs to be this idea that sometimes when we go through these big waves of change, that people will be doing a lot of discovery, and there will be a lot of iterative work, and the whole process will make those people better in all different ways, whether it's technically better, just in execution, or methodology, method wise better, right? Like my method, right? Great directors, actors, they develop their method across years often, right? They're a dynamic, right? And so um, method is a high value. And then of course there really is just the art of storytelling or world building. So the tools sometimes, will have an impact on these things. So we have to be open-minded about, where value lies. When we're talking about a person, you know, are they, just showing technical skills, but are also starting to exercise their minds and putting out ideas, right, that feel original, right? Like,
Yeah.
so the storytelling it always has been and will be, not just for Escape, but just generally, I'm sure for all of us. So the storytelling is always on top. The building is always on top. If there's any resonance, because if there's any resonance, then they're making progress, right? And so anyway, when we look at people coming into Escape, we look at all those things. We're like, okay, you might be like majoring in this particular value and minoring there, but you're moving fast, and this is constantly, sort of evolving. So we just pick people that seem to, I mean, for me personally, it's usually driven by ideas, but there are other ways people get picked. Often, um, they're nominated by their peers. So like the reason why Escape is unique is because it's not so much that, a handful of us picked everybody. They essentially picked each other across the last 2 years. We began with certain instincts like, oh my gosh, look at this pioneering work. I wonder where this person's going to go, right? So we're like not getting hung up on the single piece of media or the single film or whatever. We're just kind of like, wow, what kind of person decided to make that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or try these risky tech ideas or whatever it was. So we started it, we like catalyzed it, but then we always ask everyone coming in or trying to, it's like, who are you watching, or who do you respect? Who's exciting you? Just trying to understand. And it's just built itself, the people on skate, they've kind of built it like a micro social network.
Cool.
And then the other question is the modern creator. So the modern creator, just quickly on that. So I think that most likely the audience of this show, especially many of the core pioneers, uh, sort of intuitively understand that, it's not just a time where, hey, we can now conjure images or moving shots or assemble 2D passive films. It actually is a lot bigger than that, right? The modern creator on Escape is not someone I would uh corner into a lane where it's like, okay, that person makes 2D stories or 2D movies because they took it upon themselves to actually develop a story or world idea on top of that, right?
Yeah.
So they're IP creators, right? So, and there are a lot of ways people begin IPs. They could begin it writing novels, they could begin it making movies, they could begin it doing comics. Some begin it making games, right? But they're birthing some kind of IP, some story world. And then, you know, over time, at least in the past, over time, the fans of this, or, not just the fans, but the strength of the concept of this story world is good enough to start pushing into other media formats, right? Oh, I want to see a TV series based on The Last of Us because that was a very powerful concept for that game experience. In that case, they did a great job expanding
Yeah.
it. Right now, that is that's two groups separated by years that wound up doing that, but the strength of the concept allowed it to happen. So up to this point, by necessity, oh, it's so complex and costly to make any one of these media types. Like, you know, people often just say, okay, we just make TV series, we just make games, right? But the original creator of the IP probably can't imagine across all the formats, but they're just picking the lane that they happen to be able to do at that time. Fast forward to today. So now we get to the modern part. We're like about to enter an era where that IP creator really can be thinking across formats, and they don't necessarily have to wait. And this we'll get into the system, right? Get into the economic landscape of it, but like they don't necessarily have to wait for a series of like milestone economic, conditions to be in place to see this IP, kind of migrate into other formats. The modern creator could start thinking about now making stories and experiences, stories and games and other media types. And many of them are already, right? Many of them are starting to experiment across formats because the barriers to that, the technical and cost barriers to that have been coming down, 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 as we all know. So that's how I would sort of, define the modern creator as one that actually is enabled, should they choose to essentially incubate. I guess the contrived way to put it would be a franchise, but like really incubate the experience for fans in different formats. And that's something I've always been really interested in seeing over the years.
Yeah, that's actually why Russell and I, when we were making our feature film Awake, we were building it in Unreal Engine with that idea of the cinematics can make the feature film, but then we also have all of the sets and the characters ready to roll out a game, as well. So that's cool.
100%. I mean, Unreal
Yeah.
is, I have a lot of friends and colleagues from the original Matrix film times that went on to push the ultimate limits in AAA gaming and game engines as well. A lot of friends who actually ended up in Epic. And I absolutely agree, right, that Unreal was probably, the platform that made many people start to think that you could use that foundation to produce a cross-format sort of multimodal development, and many people have been doing that, and it also achieved, astounding, heights in terms of realism and graphics and all of these things. These are, selfishly, I like to say, like, it's, I mean, Tim Sweeney was not with us on The Matrix, but other associates. I like to think that, there is this connection across, different groups that believe in this idea, right? That you can start putting the IP across all these different kinds of formats if you have the will.
Yeah, and we'll actually touch on the Matrix UE5 experience and AR and VR later on in the interview. But yeah, maybe just one last question about Escape AI and the big one. So let's fast forward maybe 5 or 10 years. So if Escape succeeds beyond your wildest dreams, what does that world look like? And I know specifically just this week, it was everywhere in the tech blogosphere. You launched a new TV streaming app for AI cinema, AI films, shorts, and gaming. So yeah, do you think that it will be like the Netflix for AI movies, or do you think it will impact Hollywood and tech in an even more substantial, fundamental way?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard this expression so often, this Netflix AI. It's really like kind of, uh, you know, it's kind of a easy thing to say, but
Yeah.
the fact is that Netflix, when it was beginning, it was a huge disruptor just because they had chosen a completely different approach than anything before, right? They started digital distribution generally. Um, and then they evolved, of course, right? And they went from distribution to making, being a huge, huge studio unto itself, or creator. Um, and now they're trying to get into gaming in small measure, right? And probably will grow.
And interactive with the Bandersnatch, I think, kind of a choose your
Yes,
own adventure movie.
yes, they've tried things. They are a behemoth now. There are just a few of these, but they're significant, almost monolithic, verging on monopolistic. Um, it gets complex, right? Like all of the systems that they've put in place, and the sort of agreements they put in place. So the I don't know, when you say, like, is it the Netflix of AI? I think that it's the 21st century. It's 2026. I think that, you know being an agile platform that can adapt to new formats, especially, and the sort of where creators want to start taking things, right? So, is our main goal, right? We would love in 5 to 10 years to be a, like I said, a very agile, able to continue to adapt, be very adaptive. Um, the intelligent entertainment aspect of it, in a sense, is a signal to the uh, what will be coming, in so far as, yes, story worlds need to be birthed by human beings authoring, right, from human creativity, even if they are super amplified by these tools. But what I think is going to be really interesting across the next 5 years, particularly, is that a number of things. I think that, movies and interactive experiences are going to become ever more intertwined, because it's very possible to conceive of being able to see both from a common place,
Mhm.
right? Like the sort of logic of a world can be applied to a dynamic real-time experience. It can be applied to a story world. And so I do think that there's something coming across the next 5 years. I think that Escape will be at the forefront
Mhm.
of intelligent extensions of story world IP.
Mhm.
Uh, so the thing that I'm hoping is going to happen is that creators will lead us across these 5 years, right, to be the greatest of all platforms to showcase right? Diversified experiences from common seeds of story worlds.
Mhm. Yeah, and just fun aside, I always thought it'd be so cool. I love choose your own adventure books as a kid, but you know, you have to write every possible ending in advance, which for you know, filmmaking, that exponential the budget and time and resources. But AI is interesting because, you know, 24 frames per second in a video, it can generate that many that fast. And so yeah, picture, we'll talk about the goggles later, but I've tried, you know, the Meta and Oculus, and I'd love to watch Gladiator, my favorite movie, from, you know, different characters' perspectives. And then maybe when Maximus goes in the Colosseum, I can pick up the joysticks, and you know, if I'm the good Maximus, I'll save the other slaves and the story goes one way, or I'm, you know, evil, I kill everybody, become friends with Commodus. It almost invents a new movie, like GPT LLMs writing the movie
Exactly.
in real time. That would be just
There is a
incredible.
thing. There is a thing. I feel fairly confident about this. It's not, it's not today, but again, I think it's fairly conceivable that there will be, thanks to AI technology, there will be such a thing as multimodal media,
Mhm.
right? Where, I mean, in the past, especially when I was at Lucasfilm with some folks, we've experimented with this idea of, okay, it's a film, but you don't realize it's a film because it's you know, first of all, it's edited, it's beautiful, it looks like cinema. You're watching a movie, and but what we're doing is we're using a game engine to make that film. Nobody really knows that. Of course, you're just watching a film. So, but if, but at any moment you can essentially toggle off the sculpture, right? The editorial version of it, and then start going into more free mode, right? Where we, you know, start doing what you just were suggesting, take perspectives, follow characters into parallel time, like locations, and potentially just go off path, right? And just kind of go into the world and start interacting with characters, interacting with moments and scenes, right? So, um, and we've worked on that from a game engine, you know, kind of perspective. But I think that it can be enabled in a new way. And so I do think it's not that I would ever really want to break from a film, or you know, like I wouldn't really like break and go nav and break and go nav, because I want to be enthralled, I want to be taken into it. But I very much would want to come back and step inside certain moments, right? And then start, yeah, seeing it from different perspectives, but also just follow characters off path into the expository world around them. You know, to the extent that, yeah, you could very easily imagine, you know, even doing that with other human friends, but also potentially having relationships with characters, right? Gamified experience, all sorts of things, right? So limitless potential. I think that is one thing that we're going to be heading towards, is multimodal media. And then creators need to start thinking about that. In a way, some of the things that are starting to happen, for example, Project Genie with the Deep Mind,
Right.
right? Right, where you're like, oh, well, okay, that eventually is going to have more anchor points, you know, where, you know, it's not just sort of like freely imagining what comes next around the corner. I mean, I think creators will be able to put anchor points in there and hold world logic across long periods of time. Um, but you know, all of it, if you think about it, if you go back, if one image can beget, you know, a genie-esque exploratory experience, and you know, exploratory and soon interactive experience, well, that one frame could have
Mhm.
come from one moment in one movie,
Mhm.
right? It gets really exponential once you start thinking about it, and it's really incredibly exciting to, as a world builder,
Yeah.
right? What could come.
Yeah, and looking at some of Dr. Fei Li, the godmother of AI at Stanford HAI, and she's doing a lot on world building. So speaking of uh, virtual worlds and sort of simulation theory, the Matrix. So this was actually your first, I believe, VFX supervision project, which is, yeah, it's kind of wild to say out loud. And then
No,
you won.
I did
Oh,
a
okay.
projects ahead of that, but like that was the first like substantial one.
Yeah, and you won Academy Award, BAFTA for best visual effects. SMPTE, their Progress Medal. It's like 100 years old. Winners are Walt Disney, Ray Dolby, Ed Catmull, and also actually the Palo Alto Film Festival. They gave you the Muybridge Award for innovation, and I know him. I live in the Marina. I take walks around the Presidio in San Francisco, and he's got a big statue there because he invented motion pictures right in sort of the Bay Area and even Stanford tie-in. I believe the horse, the famous horse, was Leyland Stanford's horse. It was like a bet to see if all four hooves touched the ground. So yeah, I guess I'm saying like maybe it's not a coincidence that you're here and Bullet Time was done here. Yeah, any interesting stories from that time? And what's your thoughts, I guess, in general on like, is it no surprise that Pixar and Apple and Muybridge and the inventor of the electric TV was all in the Bay Area? So is that why you're here? Do you feel the technological vibe helping cinema in the area?
Golly. I mean, I began in the East Coast. I grew up in New York and lived in New York City, went to school in New York City, and but I just wound up getting pulled into an unexpected opportunity as a young person to work with a fellow named Doug Trumbull, who began in LA and was running parallel to George Lucas in terms of like breadth of invention at in these early days of visual effects. I think his father, Pappy, was his nickname, was the special head of special effects on The Wizard of Oz. So he had this
Oh, wow.
deep family history that began like that. And anyway, he's a whole person that's, it's always important to think about, know where you've come from and, what might happen next, right? It's all about being influenced and hopefully influencing others in good ways. So anyway, I wound up getting pulled into Doug Trumbull's studio, which was a secretive studio that was in Western Massachusetts, actually. It was secretive. He left LA when while he was directing a film called Brainstorm, I think, and it was about VR. And Natalie Wood, the actress, was the lead actress, and it was like she was maybe four-fifths of the way finished with filming that, and then she drowned, right? She fell off the side of a yacht, right? And
Oh,
so Doug couldn't finish the film, but then he figured out a way to finish the film. But I think that was a moment where he's like, the atmosphere around that led him to want to recluse a little bit, right? And kind of build a lab away from Hollywood. And so he decides to do this in Western Massachusetts, of all places, like in the beautiful hinterlands, right, of the Berkshires, and which has a lot of arts and such. And so somehow I wound up getting a job there, and I somehow get this connection, right, to the old, not old, but just like the superpower of Hollywood visual effects is like now in this super remote location on the East Coast of America, and I'm on the East Coast of America. I'm in New York, which is very different kind of place, right? Different influences. So somehow a bunch of people like this LA stream and this New York stream of individual young people just get, you know, their brains get incubated there by Doug. He mentors a bunch of people and he catalyzes a bunch of stuff, right? It's one of these catalytic moments in people anyhow. And then I began this kind of path of thinking, oh, maybe I need to go go west. You know what I mean? Because eventually the whole Trumbull experience kind of changed when he left. He went to take IMAX public, right? So then a whole bunch of us are like, okay, let's go west. Where do we go? Right? When this happens. And there were some people in the group who were like, hey, we know of this Navy base in San Francisco that's being abandoned right now because the Navy is shutting down 25, not the Navy, but generally the military is like reducing 25% of these bases at the time, way back time. And it was while we were literally in the middle of doing tests for the Matrix and What Dreams May Come. So we moved to the Alameda Naval Base, and you know, I convinced the Wachowskis who I was working with on these tests at that time to like consider shooting on the runways because we could build fake highways for Reloaded.
Right.
So it's kind of how I got to San Francisco, right? It was really like a forcing function. It was like my, you know, amazing scene, which was very unusual where it was and what was happening, kind of also came to a conclusion. And so we needed to do something and we needed to go somewhere. So that's what we decided to do. We decided to go to San Francisco.
Cool. Cool journey. Reminds me of the book Outliers. They have like that talks about things like that where there's just clusters of people during that are in this right place at the right time, and then it kind of
We're in a time like that right now. See, the
yeah,
thing, yeah. I mean, every so often, I mean, it can happen kind of in a local way, but it can also happen in a big way, right? Just like computer graphics changed movies forever, right? AI is going to change movies altogether.
for sure. Um, and I work in film and TV in Vancouver and Toronto. I'm talking with a lot of filmmakers above and below the line. And I was speaking with our head of hair and makeup just yesterday. There's a little bit of tension right now, persistent tension. Hollywood kind of sees Silicon Valley as, like ruthless tech bros. But at the same time, myself, and I know a lot of other people are really excited about tech integrating with cinema. Um, do you think AI-driven filmmaking's big rise was bound to happen in Northern California, or is it just that it perfectly kind of has fit there based on, everything that came before it?
Well, golly, I mean, I mean, the most advanced scientists in AI preceding this time were in various locations. I think in Canada was
Yeah,
We're
Edmonton
like
has big one.
one of the epicenters of reinforcement learning theory, and
Jeff Hinton in Toronto,
yes,
Yashua Bengio in Montreal, and then I think
exactly,
Jan LeCun in New York. Those were the three Turing Award winners.
right, exactly. So it's Silicon Valley. I mean, there's a lot in your question, right? I've spent a couple decades with I consider the best craftspeople ever in cinema and gaming to some extent and other media forms. They're my friends and colleagues. They're brilliant people, and there are different ways to look at it. The question is what is being disrupted and who's the disruptor. You can definitely um, find um, agreement with the idea of the original sin, right? Of like how it began, the current sort of revolution of Gen AI. But
Like
what,
you mean like scraping the internet and
yeah, like basically using the internet. But like there are things. So I think both things are true, right? Like so I'm kind of not a person that is going to ever throw the baby out with the bathwater in terms of the absolute extraordinary capabilities of people in those crafts, especially everything from cinematography, photography, just like human invention, performance, right? They will always, in my opinion, be of highest value. The people who are great at them, I mean, I mean, you will never, till the end of time, be able to move a human being better than the great actors, of the time. It's just always going to be that they're inventing from their minds and souls and emotively. However, it doesn't necessarily, it isn't a choice. There isn't actually a choice to discard one for the other. I don't think so. Um, so what began as research, wound up, you know, yielding breakthroughs in how to conjure, from the ether of the internet, imagery and so much more, right? So I, for one, I'm trying to be practical and pragmatic about it. You can't go backwards.
No.
It's just just cannot, right? It isn't a time machine. It's there now. And so the question is, how can we use AI generally to super amplify human beings? And it's not even a movie or media question at all. It's like an everything question.
Yeah.
Are we going to super amplify to better our lives? But there is going to be a lot of destruction. There's no doubt about it. It's just there always is. When when I was coming into the film scene, I began in film and we were still making models, right? Like lots of models. We were physically making everything. And then we started having laser cutters, right? And then it started getting more advanced, how you could make the models. And then we started using not just free cameras, we were using motion control cameras. I mean, this sounds like ancient history, but if you think about it, robotic, robotically moved cameras, right? To shoot, to start shooting miniatures that were made partly, right, through computer systems and starting to be more like architected by people and arranged and designed by people, but now just manufactured in an efficient way so we could get higher and higher goals out, we could get to higher places. And in order to control robotic cameras, you needed to understand space, right? So now you're doing a lot of advanced measurement. Then you're also getting all this other measurement. You're measuring lights. And like all this stuff over time just keeps accruing. It's like advanced learning, advanced understanding of the physical world has been a thing that's been going on for a long time, right? Decades and decades and decades. Um, so it's not a surprise to me, right, that we're like at this spot, right? And we need to just, again, just, in an agile way, human beings need to use the tools and bend the tools to their will to create things of value that can not just benefit themselves, but other people. You just have to stay on the light side of it because the dark side it really is true. There's a lot of crafts that are going to be automated. The reason why I brought up the model makers is because in comes a whole class of computer graphics pioneers that just basically wipe them off the map, and it was a sad thing. And some model makers basically learned to model in computers and they wound up becoming important people in the history of visual effects, right? They go on and on and on. So people are going to just have to adapt where they can, but there is huge opportunities, not just adapting to do another, hopefully, hopefully not to do just a Turing skill. It's like adapt to really advance your personal ability to output, fill in the blank, what you intend to make.
Yeah, Andrew always gives the example of Jurassic Park. I mean, when we were kids, we'd go to Disney University and they showed us, here's Star Wars, here's all the models and how we had to make it all work. And then if you watch the behind the scenes documentary, I think on Apple TV Plus, Light and Magic, like shows how stressful and hard and how much time it was to get all the models and get them perfect. And then, Jurassic Park being the classic example of they started with these models and designing them on CAD and having the robots walk, or the dinosaurs walk. But then, yeah, someone, on the team put a little demo on a TV on the wall outside the executive's door and say, we can do this with computers and it looks great. And I think Spielberg was talking to one of the model builders, and he joked like, "Oh, I think I'm going extinct." But now, when you watch a movie, in the '80s, there's a few model builders, and if you watch the credits of movies now on like a Marvel superhero movie, there's 100 times more people employed doing
Yeah.
this CGI. So I think it's positive. Maybe Andrew, if I'll just take this one last part, like, so when I was a kid, I loved movies and I loved tech. And then I heard about California and I love skateboarding. And so I heard about this magical place, California, that had both. And what, one sort of maxim in my life is it's easy to hate people on the internet and strangers you don't know and politicians you've never met. But like when you meet with people in person, um, it's more cordial and you understand them if you have empathy for them. So I'm just thinking, like, what's your perspective? Is the fact that Hollywood and Silicon Valley are close, could that help with more studios meeting more big tech companies and sort of avoid what happened in 2023? The WGA fighting Netflix, and big tech is evil. It could get worse with strikes this time around because the video is actually good now. So do you think the proximity of Northern and Southern California, Hollywood and Silicon Valley, do you think there's a chance there will be more collaboration going forward or no?
Gee whiz, man. You're like you're interested in this like yeah, is it like the Greeks and the Romans, not getting along? I don't, I think it might be. Um let's face it, just look at who uh is the most powerful valued companies on the planet and just think of them as gladiators and
Mhm,
just think about how long the different gladiators are going to last. You know, um, I think it would be, I mean, it's very different culture, for anyone who's worked with both kinds of businesses. I have very really different culture. And I think that at the very top of those companies, I don't see a a simple um, compatibility of of vision, but at the same time, I see an inevitable uh, convergence. This is already underway, and I think it's just a matter of time before they're just converged,
mhm.
and the dominant ones are going to be, I think, are going to be tech, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to be dire about it, but it's it's hard to imagine, where old media companies go in the face of that. So, I think you'll see there's plenty of people from old Hollywood that are as fast as they possibly can trying to get themselves inside of some, you know, uh, subsection of these giant, tech companies because there's money to make things there.
Mhm,
And so I don't know. I mean, it's like maybe what happens is that they're influenced by having creative people involved, inside them. Maybe that changes them a little bit, but
mhm.
I don't see it being an easy ride the next few years.
Yeah, and I mean that tracks. Like, there's a reason Netflix is going to buy Warner Brothers and not the way around, I guess, or even Paramount's. It's backed by tech, Oracle, Ellison Tech money. But yeah, I'm hoping people can come together and compromise. But you're right. There's a lot of think Casey Affleck with Blumhouse is working with Meta to make a movie with MovieGen. Aronofsky and his Primordial Soup Group. They're working with Google DeepMind. I think Runway's paired with Lionsgate. So we're seeing lots of pairing and cross-pollination. But okay, so let's move on to our next.
Like that, I mean, like, don't get me
Oh,
wrong.
yeah.
I'll just say, like, not to end on a dark note.
No.
I lo I love the inventions of Google DeepMind. I mean, it's not. I'm not. I'm like I said. I think these tools super amplify creators. And I think that you'll see the same kind of brilliant mind from the old paradigm. The same kind of like Zemeckis always would use new tools. He was always inventing stuff. He was fearless. Um, there's so many people, who make remarkable movies, that are natural born adopters, right?
Mhm.
They probably are moving slower because there is, the controversy of like disruption, involved. But there are a lot of pioneer filmmakers and producers, directors, producers, even writers, that want to explore. And I think that you're seeing just the beginning, chapter of it, right? Where they're seeing if they can bend it. But the one thing I think would be a mistake that's, would be to try to shackle what could be a whole new medium by trying to use it to clone an older medium, right?
Mm,
I think it should breathe and become something unto itself. I think Gen AI presents enormous opportunities for experimentation, exploration, you know, uh, both in finally getting original ideas out that have been essentially unable to happen because it was too costly or too difficult to get seen. Uh, but also just experimenting with the form again, right? Because you can. So I do think there's going to be a renaissance. In my view, there's going to be a renaissance. There's going to be a lot of business wars in the breaching moments here, but there's going to be on the other side a renaissance of many, many, many enabled creators from the old paradigm and this insurgent class of creators. I think that they will, in a sense, be the same insofar as their will to get their original ideas, their original stories finally made.
mhm,
That simple, or game experiences finally made. They share that interest.
mhm,
So at some point, I think the creators will unify.
mhm.
It's just the details of the fairness of the business end of things. Yeah, that is going to just be yeah, very a lot of battles coming.
Mhm. One battle after another. Okay, yeah. So let's move. We talked about escape AI. Let's go beyond the matrix. A lot of people know you primarily through the matrix, but looking back at your career so far, what's a different project that you're especially proud of that you think maybe deserves a little more recognition or attention on your Wikipedia or bio page?
Golly, I mean, there's been a lot of interesting projects. Geez,
Maybe directing on Trapped Ashes.
I wouldn't put that at the top.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put that at the top because it was fun. I shot it in Vancouver, but it was a horror anthology, right? And I worked with some other great creators. What's his name? Cunningham. What's his first name? Who did
Sean Cunningham and Joe
yeah,
Dante,
Sean.
I think.
Joe Dante did Two-Lane Blacktop and other phenomenal films. Um, Ken Russell, who did Lair of the White Worm and Tommy, just like insane psychedelic horror masters. So I'm like, they talked me into joining them for some reason. So I did that just kind of for the experience of that. It was very, very low budget. I can't say, I'm not sure if I liked the results, but it was like a phenomenal uh personal experience. Yeah.
Mhm,
At any rate, but I mean, so many interesting projects. I mean, I did pioneering work. I felt when I was at Inworld AI, right?
Mhm.
I worked with Neil Stephenson, the great science
Oh
fiction
yeah,
author.
Seven Eves,
Um,
it's a great book.
oh, he's a friend and a colleague. We knew each other from Magic Leap. We did a lot of experiments again in essentially the idea of embedding a story universe into the mind of a singular character. That was like the basic idea of what we were starting to think about. He was thinking about things like, can I tell beyond a novel's worth of story through a character, right? An intelligent character. Just Inworld. Inworld was a company that was spun out of ex Google DeepMind and Google Dialogflow people. And also John Snoddy was involved in a similar pursuit at Inworld. He was another advisor. John Snoddy, the head of research for Imagineering for many years.
Yeah, and
Um,
I've met Ilya, the first CEO, and Kylan, the current CEO. They're
yeah.
great.
So I enjoyed my time there. We did some really advanced character experiences. I made one called Origins, which Kylan named. But it was it was an exploratory crime kind of experience, crime scene experience in which you were trying to understand what happened at a scene, and there was like you would only understand it by having interactions with different characters that were spread throughout, hidden throughout the scene. I think that was a real pioneering project that was kind of known to people following at least this the birth of AI NPCs. And um, before that, I mean, I was very proud of working on the Awakens project with Kim. That was with Kim Library, the CTO of Epic. That was again a goal to paint a picture of the future. So like cinematic fidelity story worlds that you could play in or shoot movies in or do any of those sorts of things, but coupled with the launch of Unreal 5 and the promise of like the most advanced real-time graphics that have ever been created. That was very exciting to do with them. We also worked with the Wachowskis with Lana and the actors Keanu. They were captured for various parts of that, so it was really a unique experience.
Mhm.
And it was intertwined that project with a notion to essentially reposit the Matrix universe at a time when it was probably as relevant as it has ever been in terms of what contextually what was happening has been happening in the world. So we're like,
Definitely.
this would be, like I spent a lot of time around that Resurrections movie time. The Resurrections kind of was um had a really difficult time getting made. It was they literally made it during the pandemic. Um, I did not want to do visual effects at that anymore, right? I was like well out of visual effects at that point. I was into other kinds of new form, and so I sort of pulled back, did do that, but I did want to help expand the universe in other mediums, right? So the Unreal Awakens project was actually only one component of a number of components that we were developing that we wanted to try to like reintroduce the universe. We were also doing um, a lot of like super high-end real-time VR work. We were thinking of again that Awakens Unreal that whole project was actually intended to be the backdrop of a new Animatrix 2.0 series. So we were thinking about Animatrix 2.0.
Right.
Love the
First
Animatrix.
one, yeah.
One of my favorite DVDs
Yeah.
I ever owned.
And it continues in my thinking continues onward like so that at that time I was when we had finished the Awakens project. Again, like Kim, my friend, and some of our colleagues, we were like looking at what was created by that team. They were literally building polishing off the first release version of Unreal 5 at the same time we were making that demo. Like in a way, they were reinforcing each other, some of the things we were doing. And they do that purposefully, right? They don't just make tech in a vacuum. They figure out how they're going to apply it in gaming experiences. And so they like to do that as they advance the tech, which is why their company's so strong. But the we got done with that, and we were like standing on a virtual street corner saying, this is an incredible, incredible achievement that's been done here. But the only thing, beyond all of the absolutely landmark, uses of generative technology to build environments and like, imagine like, the detail on the most minute level, in an intelligent way. The only thing we knew then, though, that was like none of the characters in this experience know they're here, right? And there was no awareness. They were still dumb NPCs, and that was one of the incentives for me to like go move on and try to understand, well, okay, how do we build minds for these characters? How do we build minds for these, citizens of these virtual worlds? So each of these things, you do take steps. They make sense when you start adding things together. That's a big interactive experience based on a movie world. We want those things to actually not be separated from one another. We want them to be frictionlessly, effortlessly within reach of each other, like a trapdoor or a portal from one to the other. So the Epic thing was a great project, and I could talk about XLab. There's so many. There's a lot of remarkable experiences.
Yeah. And we do have actually questions for all these topics. Inworld, makes sense then why you were there. They were the first to use a large language model to make NPCs smart. So yeah, maybe I'll just move us along here a little bit so we can get to those questions. But one kind of fun wildcard question is, so your Twitter bio describes you as an anti-establishmentarian escape artist at the School of Make-Believe. So that's a very intriguing description. I'm kind of wondering, is that for real or is just something funny? And I think you even mentioned trying to hold a seance with FDR, who's my personal hero and favorite president. So kind of what did you mean by that? Are the establishments big tech and Hollywood? Is there stuff that you didn't like about those industries, or maybe in a more positive spin? What would you change about them as an anti-establishment type of guy?
Yes, you have been digging. So, I think it's still rooted to experiences as in my earlier years. I think that, okay, I'll try to dot connect where that came from to why it's still true today. It's if from a creator's point of view, their goal is to try to take something that's inside of them, an idea, a story, something that they're passionate about, and get it out, either for the cathartic experience of just doing it, because it makes them, it gives them a sense of well-being, or whether it's because they want to communicate to other people and all of these things. And so it's always been hard for creators to do that as in the media arts anyway, in like film and such. I mean, painters, okay, as long as they can afford the paint, which still costs a lot of money, the canvas, it costs money. But as you start to get to more sophisticated things, you start realizing that it's hard to get through without partnerships. And some of these partners, especially in the financing area, right, start imposing, their own ideas, constraints, and they start bending the creator's vision. And that's already a very difficult thing to go through as a creator, is to start working with others that are not necessarily thinking about your end result as a expression, but more as like a commercial, sort of outcome. And so it's difficult.
The dreaded director's notes, or like, hey, why don't you cast this actress? She has a big social media following and lots of likes. Yeah, I could see
Well,
sometimes.
if you think about it, it's like the most valuable universes that exist in entertainment are not owned by the original creators. Most of them.
Lord of the Rings, Marvel,
I mean,
Dune, Star
that's where you
Wars.
that's where you start, right? You start with that cold fact. So, I think that it has always been this like interesting dance between the enabler supporters, the financiers, which, you know, up to this time, I mean, most of those things may have never seen the light of day or been exposed to audiences, and so they did fulfill, part of their, role in it all, but it's been at great cost to many creators to lose control. It's like if you're really a creator and you spent the amount of emotional and thinking energy into birthing a story world, and then now it's in the hands of somebody else. It's kind of like losing a kid. It's like, okay, your child is now, in a foster parent home, right? And now they're going to decide what's going to happen there. They're going to decide what's appropriate when. And so I think that's a really difficult experience for creators, and it's been that way for quite a while, right? And I think that the old paradigm, like the old, so different studios are have sort of done things differently over the years. I am endlessly fascinated by the story of Walt Disney, the person, and what he did and how he began and what drove him and how he was able to tap into, right, just whole new sort of way of thinking about human experience, stepping into story worlds, right, and expanding people's imaginations and all the things that he did. And I watched as a child, in my grandparents' living room, I watched World of Color like every week, and and he would come into your living room and he would talk to you, right, in this respectful way, and it was always about kind of expanding your imagination and taking a step and then so to me, Disney is like I have complicated feelings about Disney because it really has that origin of like birthing all of these beautiful story worlds, but beloved worlds, and they still really are focused on children. They're focused on the family experience, and somehow they've kept it together,
Yeah.
right? But there's another part of Hollywood that basically, you know, doesn't really, things come to them, they finance it, and then they keep it.
Yeah.
That's simple. And the creators maybe get their chance. And in the older days, creators used to be allowed to participate in a more significant way, right? They could become quite, successful. Um,
Well,
but
that
over
almost
the
happened with Pixar, right? And Toy Story, they were kind of prepared to finance it, but then they said, no, you're not doing it the way we need to. And then they went away and built up more. And then eventually Disney was like, all right.
Yeah, that's the whole Jobs. That was the whole Jobs
Yeah.
intervention, right? I know that's a whole fascinating side story, right? There isn't. That's a very good. That is probably one of the. We don't have time for it, but that might be the right sort of convergence of tech and entertainment. Creator think type of story to reflect on. To your point, right? How that went, but I mean, my point is that like what the anti-establishmentarianism is about is, you know, it's just that, really. Does it feel right today seeing all of these worlds now just in the hands of huge corporations, right? Making untold billions upon billions for some people, And then creators, they've made some money, some fees, they've got some notoriety, but look what they began, right? And they're not necessarily in control of any longer of these things that they like a lot. There's a lot of writers, like just look at writers generally. Um, Writers are really the start point of whole franchises. They do it, but how much do they really benefit over the long term? I'm fine with the idea of unions trying to protect them, but there's a greater problem than needing some kind of protective shield to scrape a little bit is still wrong to me in at the end of the day, right? That you have to fight that hard. So, you know, I look at AI, the age of AI, slightly differently. I look at it as potential empowerment, that the real story isn't about it isn't only about disruptive tools and displacement. I think the real story is about empowerment, right? Where there is potential for individuals and groups to kind of, and distribution is a problem, and that's one of the reasons why escape exists, right? There's hopefully it's been tried several times over, but the energy that is inevitably going to push a lot of brilliant minds out of the old paradigm into the new has everything to do with these constraints and this sort of existing system that monopolizes IP.
Yeah, I'll never forget the sort of meme video of George Lucas sitting down with Bob Iger, and with one stroke of a pen, he makes $2 billion or whatever, but loses Star Wars. You can kind of see a flash of almost regret on his
Yeah.
face. But
Well, switching things up a bit, Russell and I grew up just outside of Toronto. I work here as a producer, director, AD, and everybody in the area, I believe you would say Keanu Reeves is a big hometown hero for us. All Canadians
definitely.
really love him. Super proud of him as a genuine person, and a humble celebrity that we like to think reflects Canadian values.
Definitely.
So we're, wondering, do you still keep in touch with him?
I try to. I mean, I like the way you put it, Canadian values. I think, yeah, he does have values. There's no doubt about it. Um, it's just he's a remarkable uh, person, actor, because he's gone this many years with people consistently maintaining respect and appreciation for not only like what he can do in movies, but just the way he is, right? The way he treats people. And it is authentic. Those stories are true. He's a real collaborator. He works hard as hell. He tries to work as hard as everyone else, if not harder. He makes money, but he's also making a lot of money for other people, right? He's really is. Um,
And he gave up, I think, a big portion of his salary to the VFX artists on The Matrix, right?
the stunt team.
Stunt team, yeah.
So yeah, the stunt team on The Matrix, uh, those guys were, for The Matrix, those guys were paired up with Wu Ping, the famous Chinese Hong Kong action movie director, famous director in China. And they kind of, in my opinion, that was like the inception, the fusion of like East and West, approach to action and martial arts and movies and all that happened there, in my opinion. Right? Like this Wu Ping meets these guys, Chad and Dave and the team that worked with Keanu, and then they went on to it's just like your statement was, he gave money to somebody, he gave money to the stunt team because those guys worked with him 24/7 and absolutely had an influence over his sort of thinking about what was possible for an individual to do. It wasn't just like, hey, see if you can fake these punches. They like trained him and trained him and trained him and trained him. And the combination of them and Wu Ping's team from China, it's obviously like a big moment, as an individual in terms of growth, right? Like he's so
Sure, he's John Wick
yeah,
now too, right? Like that's
well, yeah, Chad and Dave went from The Matrix. I think they did Kill Bill, the Kill Bill series after that.
Wow.
They've done so many things. They they formed this group called I think it was called 8711, and 8711 what they like started they really started to think like we want to experiment with directing too. And then Lana um and Lily let them do second unit for Ninja Assassin, which was this insane horror kung fu movie that we did in Berlin after Speed Racer. So they did second unit. I was like a special director for the next unit, so I did all the other stuff on after that,
Mhm.
after those guys. But they were learning directing, and then they started really pushing and trying to get a film of their own, and they were able to get John Wick off the ground. It was great. Keanu wanted to work with them, so Chad and Dave started that, and then Chad kept, after the first film, or second first film, I think he kept going and took it all the way to the where we're at. And they took a pause on Wick between 3 and 4 to slip the Matrix Resurrections in there, which they should maybe like that was a pretty big ask, you know what I mean, when they were like just seriously powering along at the leading edge of action film. But it was because there was such a solid bond amongst all the people that did those first few films. I mean, it was like a really solid bond, that was built across years. Anyway, so yeah, like yes, he did that, Keanu did that, but it was a lot more to it than, like a thank you of the moment, I think.
Mhm. Yeah.
do you have any opinions on AI back then? I
Yeah.
mean, obviously, it was a huge theme of the Matrix.
It's
Is
just
he for AI or is he still worried
oh,
it's
I'm
gonna?
terrified of it like everybody else, but I'm
Yeah.
using it. It's all things like we got to be grown up about it, right? It's all things. It's gonna serve, it's gonna solve intractable problems. It at some point could allow food to come to people who are starving. There's so many things it could do in a positive way, but it also could be the next nuclear era, right? Could
Mhm.
be AI weaponized and enslavement. There's so many bad things that can come from it
Mhm.
that we have to collectively as a human race stay on top of and somehow steer. Trust um I don't trust super corporations and governments to necessarily do the right thing, so it needs somehow there needs to be checks and balances on it. But at the same time, again, I believe it could open up a renaissance of human creativity, human ingenuity, you know, being able to architect things that we couldn't before. So I have mixed feelings about it. It's going to be both, and there better be a lot of people like, not just trying to slow it down because it's not going to really slow down. They really should use their energy in demonstrating the art of the possible with it.
Yeah, it's
You
like
know?
Henry Ford. I was just reading his autobiography, I guess, and he's talking about how companies were trying to prevent the combustion engine and his car, but then it really didn't stop anything. He came out with it, but then the combustion engine was not only used in automobiles, which obviously changed the world, but you can use it for a generator, for generating electricity or driving a mill or other things like that. Like the technology, like you said, AI is everything for everything. It's a similar paradigm shift as back then. And, he said, there'll never be a system invented which will do away with the necessity of work. I think people are always going to be working on stuff. Now they'll just be freed up to create more fantastical worlds and things. Um,
Well, how about cure disease?
yeah, exactly, right?
Stop famine,
Yeah.
right? So, try to look if it if it ever achieves, right, super intelligence, then, can it solve, poverty? Can it solve all sorts of things, right?
Energy,
Aging,
yeah,
aging.
yeah, aging,
Epigenetic research
Alzheimer's.
right now. They're looking at reversing aging and trying to get the FDA to classify aging as a disease. So,
Yeah, you're right. I mean, yeah, the only problem with living longer is that the world is very populated, but
Mhm.
I would do anything for like another day or another year or a decade, right? I'm like ready to, um, I don't think it's quite ready, but like, look, what my mind is sharp and I want to be able to live for 400 more years. So I'm trying to game out when, because the cryogenic stuff, maybe it works, maybe it'll work. We don't know because we haven't seen anyone awoken ever, right? Or any mind be re-sleeved, right, into another vessel. But
Mhm.
I'm interested in staying on the planet longer. So I'm hoping that, there's some help there.
um, you attended NYU Tisch for your honors BFA. It's one of the world's top film schools, ranked number one in the US by 2025, the RAP, and it's a leading East Coast program. I had the privilege of attending Sheridan College for film and TV productions where Steve Spaz Williams went, who did Terminator and Jurassic Park. I know a lot of big schools used to recruit out of there, like Disney for their animation program. What do you think is the best part about these programs? Like rigorous training, industry connections, something else? Do you think it'll be something that's lost if people are just using AI and starting to make their own movies without going to school?
Well, okay, I can summarize the values these years after I went to NYU. Um, they they teach you a little bit about film theory. They teach you how to operate equipment, and they shove you out into the world and they make you start making short movies, basically. Uh, so the tech, in my opinion, can constantly change and all of that. I think there's real value in learning photography because it infers that you're capturing the world and you're putting that into your films in some way, and you're working with people and actors. So I think that will always be of high value, whatever way you wind up capturing them. But the other tech should be like really dynamically, they should, and I can't say exactly how agile. I mean, in fact, actually, I do know some stuff about NYU today, and they are starting to, push a bunch of intelligent technology stuff out there. But, for me, the real education was just iterating on making films with people in New York City because New York City, the experience of being in New York City is unlike anything. And I do think that that part, the environment you're surrounded by, the people you're with, and just being enabled to fail, to try and fail, try and fail, try and fail is everything, right? And the thing that I think is interesting when you go from then, when I was there to now, again, when you start thinking about what Gen AI is going to do and is doing, I see filmmakers, storytellers on a super accelerated course that are not in film school. They're making movies. They figured out the tools. The tools were intuitive enough. The smart ones are collaborating with some other people that complete them, but um, it's the iteration that actually starts turning things on inside an understanding, right? Like you start understanding from trial and error. I do think that this moment with Gen AI, in which actors are not really being used as often, is really only because the tools have just recently enabled performance capture. And when performance capture really was possible in animated films, like as motion and visual effects, and motion capture got more advanced, all kinds of other universal capture, type of stuff, um, volumetric capture. Once those things started entering the scene, they transformed animated movies, they transformed real movies. So advances in capture are always important. So Gen AI is just getting going in terms of ingestion of capture, captured things. And I think that even though there's a lot of like 100% AI native cinema that has very little capture, I think the entire future is very likely based on fusing together captured things, with Gen AI tools,
Mhm.
Locations, pictures of worlds, captures of people, right? And even concept art, anything that can be made and brought in, especially when you start doing that and you think about the integrity that is gained when one wants to copyright, because copyright is good for everybody, everybody, right?
Mhm.
Every creator should be able to copyright original ideas. But it's good to anchor, right? Good to anchor things like that. Um, anyway, so what I think though is that it's worth going to film school if, the result is that you learn to, you know, use the tools that you were given and tried, to work and fail along with other colleagues. Can you do it without film school? You can, actually. You could. You can do it now. Gen
Mhm.
AI has is starting to enable people around the planet to actually produce and iterate rapidly and learn from what they're doing.
Mhm.
Um, so it's a tough question. It's the other thing that's a tough question is the unfair cost of education generally has shut a lot of people out. So
Right.
going to NYU today is like a huge financial lift for many people, and it's quite unfair because it keeps a lot of people outside. But if not just NYU, but just like all like American schools, right?
USC, UCLA, yeah, of course, yeah.
It's a really difficult proposition getting into school these days. That wasn't as true years back, but but therein, is an example of like, well, that doesn't mean it's the end of the line for you because you could start today. You
Right.
know, you could start right now. And whilst I don't think everybody will end up this way, I mean, I think that some people will wind up getting what they need um, to learn and understand outside of a school system faster and debt free.
Yeah.
So there's, there's,
Just take
there's
a Curious Refuge AI filmmaking course, a screenwriting
think
course,
about
and
like if you think about like if you've at least decided you're like, okay, I want to tell stories, make films, make games, do this, if that's your direction, and you think about like, okay, what do I got to do to get there? And if it's first a lot of learning, self, fail, succeed, lessons in making, and then but on the other part would be like, and how much debt am I carrying as a human being, so that I can keep going and making films? What am I now, you know, what do I have to do, right, in order to get out from under the debt? That's a totally different, place to start from.
mhm.
So I think that it definitely is making a lot of people think about the cost of school, but also just naturally get pushed into a different way of getting themselves enabled.
Mhm. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. Maybe we'll just there's one question this leads into, and then we can wrap things up. So yeah, speaking of sort of copyright and protections, and I know you're in the DGA, Directors Guild of America, and the strikes of 2023 with the Writers Guild and SAG. I mean, Andrew was watching them closely. He's a member of the Writers Guild of Canada, Directors Guild of Canada. This Strikes seem to start about residuals, but the AI story, their storytellers, I don't know if it became the central issue, even though ChatGPT was not really writing full scripts back then. But yeah, I am hearing rumors that WGA will look at striking again, especially now that LLMs and the video is much better. And we're seeing Dustin Crabtree Ireland, I think the SAG president, he was talking about a perceived existential battle against big tech and AI. And Joseph Gordon-Levitt, he's got a new, I think, group called Protect Human Artistry. So what AI protections do you think are essential? And what are the ones that you think will hold creators back? If you didn't get into NYU Tisch, now you can greenlight yourself, write the script yourself, maybe make a trailer, put it on YouTube, a sizzle reel, put it on TikTok, sort of get discovered that way. So, I mean, maybe you can't talk about what the WGA thinks, but what's your thought on the strikes and what do you think would be fair protections to ask for, but also the stuff that you would maybe not support?
Well, as I said before, I think copyright is good for everybody. So just starting
Yeah.
with copyright, I think all artists need to be protected for their original ideas. And I think that ideas matter as much as anything. When if you read some of the deliberations of the Copyright Office, they talk about the history of advanced media, when cameras, are a camera is nothing until a human being points it and decides what they're pointing at, and that is the act of creativity. So the human being is authoring, making choices that result in the image on the other side of that. Uh, Same too with computers, computer graphics generally. They're just tools. Human beings are utilizing technology to arrive at outcomes purposefully. And so computer computers and computer graphics for a while were also debated by the Copyright Office. If something was made by computers, not human hands, is that actually human authored? And the answer is yes, it is. And
But if
it's
a camera falls in the gorilla's enclosure at the zoo and he snaps a picture that cannot be copyrighted because he didn't
that
know what he was
that I think is unfair to animals, but looking past that, the
elephant painters, yeah.
it all has to do with the intention. And so I definitely think there is a line. I definitely think that, you know, auto wallpaper slop, whatever you want to call it, is verging on not uh, being authentic enough. I don't want to see the internet and all of our media channels filled with automated content that no person has made deliberate artistic decisions to make. For anyone who knows these tools and is working at the leading edge, as all the creators on Escape are, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of arduous work. There's planning involved. People plan things that's very deliberate what people are doing with the tools, right? It will get more, and this is sort of like separate from the whole debate on the original sin. I don't know how that's going to end up. All I know is like everyday people who are using these tools to create stories and expressions of themselves deserve copyright, especially, and it's more valid, especially if they think clearly about the origin of the seed, the beginning of the seeds, and where that comes from. I'm totally against likeness theft. I don't like cloning. I don't like that kind of stuff. But anyone who really actually is honest with themselves knows that every artist is influenced by artists before them. Every
Right.
movie maker has been influenced by movie makers before them. Every writer has been influenced by other writers before them. It is an everyday norm that people essentially, you know, make these creative decisions based on a formula, right? Like people like this, or this is it's just like a formula for form.
Mhm.
So
The
The
hero's
Declaration of
journey,
yeah.
Independence.
character
Yeah.
arc. Yeah.
It's like the Virginia Constitution, which was like uh, Denmark, I think, before that.
So like we just have to be honest with that, and the so I'm 100% in protecting people's copyrights and doing anything to stop I don't like likeness theft at all. I think that could lead to social violence, even like brutality, right? And all that stuff. I don't think that's a good idea, a wise idea. But I do think that as if you know, the protectors of creators take into account those sorts of things and not restrict creativity generally, right? And don't hold back people who want to make original stories, original ideas, right? As long as they don't inadvertently, right, constrain human creativity using whatever technology they want, um, then, I understand why they want to do that, and we'll see what comes out of those negotiations. As I've said many times on this call, uh, you know, I'm not, I don't have great love of corporate monopolies, and groups that figure out a way to hoard and take IPs from creators or not at least share. I think we're, I think that there's gonna be that we need to be entering an era of fairness. We're sharing, at a minimum, like, okay, I'll help enable you. I'll put money behind it, but I'm going to be better at sharing the the outcomes, the financial outcomes. We're in an era right now where it's very anti-sharing, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And that is why there needs to be outlets for creators, alternatives, right? So they need to be allowed to make things without restriction, without, again, uh, 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 you know, things we just talked about. And then they need to be able to get their content out and be able to potentially just have relationships directly with consumers. So we'll see how things go. I try not to get too. I mean, this stuff is super complicated. There's going to be all these huge, struggles and legal entanglements, and it'll be like lawfare, right, on steroids, but I think at the end of the day, just don't do harm to creators. can is equally can be equally be spoken to giant corporations, both tech and entertainment could equally be spoken to guilds if they inadvertently potentially, slow creators. um, so let's set some good rules, that are still going to benefit the emergence of creators, um, and let's not, like, inadvertently cause damage to people starting, trying to start out, or people trying to become independent and less captured by a near monopolistic system.
Mhm. Yep. And those are some great points. And there's the bell. So, John, this has been incredible. You're consistently ahead of the curve, not just technically, but philosophically. We just can't thank you enough for coming on. So, are there any other projects or websites you'd like to plug? We'll put them in the description. Obviously, we've got escape.ai, and people should download your new app for AI films and gaming. It's available on Roku, Amazon Fire, smart TVs, Samsung, LG, I think Apple. So anything I'm missing that you wanted to plug, we'll add links in the description.
Uh, the only thing I'll say is that that Escape is currently getting ready for its second annual Escape Awards, which we run, similar to an academy where the creators on Escape nominate each other, their peers. It's not a competition. It's not about single pieces of media. It's about people. And so if you're a creator on Escape, and you have hung on for close to 2 hours on this thing, if you're still here listening to this, yeah, nominate your peers, go in there, think about that, get ready for voting. We're going to have this award show on March 13th, 2 days before the Academy Awards. There's so much more I could talk about, but let's just leave it at that. Leave it at the awards.
Thank you so much for your time and continuing to push storytelling forward, especially in moments when the path isn't obvious. Do you have one final piece of advice for our listener?
Yes, believe in yourself. understand that you can learn and do things beyond anything you've done before, because the times are allowing that to happen for all of us. Generally, it's true. The future is yours.
Future
Because the
is
future is yours.
yours. Thank you so much.